Hello, I'm Lorianne Lumby with Authentic Freedom Academy, and today is Friday, February 5th, 2021, and this is our weekly Friday service. And we have a powerful theme that's going on, but I don't have a name for it yet. So uh, maybe I'll have a name by the time we allow ourselves to arrive here. So let's take a few moments in quiet to allow ourselves to land in this space, leaving behind our to-do lists, our preoccupations, our worries, anxieties, fretfulness. Giving ourselves permission to set those aside so that we can bring ourselves, our own need for self-care, spiritual and emotional support, so that we can bring that into our space. Bringing our awareness and attention into this present moment. Remembering that as we take this time for ourselves, we are creating our own safe and sacred space. And from that place of attention to your own inner journey, I invite you to listen to these words from the Gospel according to Mark. Jesus departed from there and came to his native place, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What kind of wisdom has been given him? What mighty deeds are wrought by his hands? Is he not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Jesus then said to them, "A prophet is not without honor, except in his native place, among his own kin, and in his own house. As such, he was not able to perform any mighty deeds there, apart from curing a few sick people by laying his hands on them. Jesus was amazed at their lack of faith. I chose that reading for today's gathering as I believe that it perfectly reflects a theme that is happening, at least among the women and possibly the men in this circle. It's a theme that I thought first wasn't a theme, it was just my own garbage. And then, over the course of the last week, at least 5 others came forward with a very similar experience, struggle, difficulty. And it took me a while to land on, what is this really about? And so I sat in prayer over my own experiences related to this theme and those that I had heard from others. And at the core of all of it is the very real experience, the heartbreaking and soul eviscerating experience of not being seen, heard, known, or understood. In particular, by those who are supposed to know, understand, see, and hear us. The stories that came forward through members of this community were all related to family members creating some sort of conflict that, as scripture used, that we in this community found ourselves taking offense with. The offense being the heartbreaking realization that those who are supposed to know us, understand us, hear us, see us, and be a source of support for our truest self cannot, do not, perhaps refuse to, or are simply operating out of their own conditioning, or perhaps out of their own woundedness even. Because the very real and sad reality is that we live in a culture, Western culture, that ignores the mystic. That perhaps might demonize the mystic, that rejects the mystic, or at the very least, just simply doesn't have room for the mystic. Because as women and men of sensitivities, certain sensitivities, as women and men of spiritual gifts and a spiritual calling, we don't fit in the Western paradigm of drive, strive, achieve, cajole, make money, 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 money. And as a result, simply by our presence, we cause cognitive dissonance in those that don't to see, or ears to hear, our heart to understand. Unlike Eastern cultures, and I would say especially India, where the mystic is honored and supported, and space is created for them in that culture, we do not have this in the West. And if there are men, most likely, sometimes women, who have a spiritual calling, it might be more religious than spiritual. And the roles that they might be taking don't defy the patriarchal, hierarchical cultural norm because they have accepted that calling to be in an ordained priesthood, specifically a priesthood that is hierarchical and clerical. And there is a piece in that that is about power, or can be for some. So in the last couple weeks, this wound of not being seen, not being heard, not being understood, and not being known seems to be coming to the surface to be acknowledged. But these things don't ever come to the surface just to be seen, especially if we are indeed on that mystical path. These things are coming to the surface to be transformed. And the first layer of that transformation is about self-care. As I mentioned earlier, it is heartbreaking and soul eviscerating to realize that those who are meant to be, those who care for and support and celebrate us, are unable or unwilling. So we first have to acknowledge the grief and the loss and the disappointment that comes along with that realization. But even more than that, we have to acknowledge the trauma, because this is not a new wound. This is a wound that likely we have carried our entire lives. Because this inability to see, to be seen, to be heard, to be known, was most likely evidenced at a very early time in our lives. A time that is perhaps even pre-conscious. That moment when we first understood on some survival level that the people assigned to and who had accepted responsibility for our care, our survival, our nurturing and support, are unwilling or unable to be that for us in the way that we need. Because there's a very real survival trauma that comes with not being seen or not being heard or not being understood. And we could take that survival trauma all the way to our infancy and the very real things that we need to survive, to eat, to be held, to be comforted. And so often, those very real survival needs go unmet or are not met in the way that we authentically needed them to be met. So, in acknowledging the grief, recognizing the trauma, and creating space for giving ourselves comfort and support and love in the best way that we are able is the beginning of that transformation. The second part of that transformation comes in letting go of expectations, hopes, desires, dreams that we might have had of these individuals being a source of recognition and support. At some point, when that failure continues to show itself over and over and over, we have to stop beating ourselves up over that and specifically stop hoping, dreaming, imagining, wishing, and simply let go of those desires. And there's also a terror in acknowledging and letting go of those desires because we're afraid that if we let it go from those people that are supposed to love us, that we'll never get it anywhere else. But the truth of the matter is that it is not blood that makes a family. It is soul connection. So while we are conditioned to believe that the intimacy and the depth and the love and the acceptance that we all crave as human beings, while we are conditioned to believe that it should come to us from our birth families, it often does not. And with that acknowledgement, we are invited to let go of our attachment to that and open our eyes to those who are already around us, already connected with us. Those that we feel that heart and soul connection with, those who we know do authentically see us and understand us and know us and honor us. And I know I'm very grateful this week for several who came forward literally out of nowhere with a note or a gift or a card that says, in essence, I see you. I see you and I honor you. I understand what you're doing and what you're about, and I support that. These are our soul families. These are the people that see us and know us and support us and celebrate us and comfort us and sometimes guide us. So in that experience of feeling unseen, we first have to address the grief and disappointment and the deeper trauma related to that realization. We then need to move into self-care, self-celebration, self-honoring. And we are invited to open our eyes to those who are right here in our midst that have been and will continue to be that source of support and loving care that every human being authentically needs. And I think in a special way, in a culture that doesn't make room for the mystic, we have to rally each other. We have to come together in sisterhood and brotherhood and be that which others have not been able to be for us. I am also aware that as this has been coming up for so many in this circle, I have to believe that not only are we being invited to transform this for ourselves, but in doing so, supporting the transformation of that for our world. If we are indeed moving into a time that is more clearly encompassing the divine feminine, then so too are we going to be invited to reclaim the critical role to a culture of its mystics and prophets and healers and teachers. If we are indeed moving into a time of the sacred feminine, these inner esoteric gifts that have been suppressed, repressed, ignored, demonized in our world will be making themselves known. And as we do this work for ourselves and hold that intention of doing that same work for the world, we are creating the space in which those with the spiritual and mystical gifts will once again have a place in our world, will once again experience the unbidden support that was given to the ancient priestesses, will once again no longer need to worry or have concern about their survival or their basic needs, because the community will honor and support them. And I know we're not there yet, but the fact that we are able to gather in this virtual community tells me that we are well on our way. And one final thing I want to share. As I was sitting in reflection with all of this, an even bigger piece came into view. Because all of this ultimately is about the divine feminine. It is about the divine feminine that dwells within each and every one of us, female and male. And an interesting thought came to mind, and I'm not saying that this is what's going to happen, but something maybe to put into our awareness. For the first time in American culture, anyway, we have a woman in the executive office. A woman that right now has been given the title Vice President, Kamala Harris. As these things are percolating, it makes me wonder if the universe is helping to prepare us for a woman president. And I know I'm acutely aware of what that means in this country. I'm also acutely aware of the resistance to a woman in that office in this nation. While I personally don't think there should be any resistance or hesitation around a woman as president of the United States, I know many who do, especially women. And this is again one of those wounds that we have to heal. This inability, enculturated, conditioned inability among some women to celebrate the success of one of her sisters. The conditioning that has left many women in disbelief or not believing in a powerful woman or a woman in a position of power. I know many women who are personally threatened by women of power, women who speak their truth, who work for justice. And I heard the cacophony of protesting around Kamala Harris being chosen as the vice president with Joe Biden. Part of this healing as we move more fully into the time of the divine feminine is to set aside our feminine jealousy, pettiness, cruelty. And that again begins by healing our own woundedness. Our own woundedness specifically around all those places where we were not honored or seen or heard or recognized for the powerful, intuitive, creative, authentic, honest women that we are. So to seal this week's lesson, I pulled a card, attempted to pull a card from my Kali deck, Kali Oracle deck, and got two. So I am going to share with you the two images of the divine feminine that decided to be our sources of support today. The first one is Kali Kapali. Kali Kapali, she who wears the mala of skulls around her neck, shall never abandon you. She shall be with you always, lifetime after lifetime, in unending tenderness and devotion, conquering that which would alienate you from your truth and your creative power. Trust in the effectiveness of your prayers and requests for her assistance. Have confidence in divine intervention. No matter how dire things may seem, you shall transform a negative experience into a positive one that honors your soul. That is Kali Kapali's message for us this week. And the second aspect of the divine feminine that showed herself is Bhuvaneswari. Bhuvaneswari. Bhuvaneswari is our cosmic mother. She is the light bringer, the sun and moon, the light of renewal and healing. She is the divine voice, the sound of creation, the sublime note that births a golden era. Hers is the capacity to create a clean slate and a fresh start. She is hope and she is arising. She protects and preserves that which is worthy of the heart. She shines in a perpetual state of divine beauty and radiance, reigniting our creative fires and attracting to us the most supportive and honoring circumstances. Her presence signifies utmost grace. Thank you for being present here today, either live or virtually, and take those messages into your heart as you allow yourself to care for the parts of you that have not felt seen, heard, recognized, honored, or known. And allow yourself to be open to the healing of that wound and the transformation and what shall come forth from that deep inner work.